Hello everyone. Thanks for joining in. I'm Niharika and we also have Pratiksha here. We are from the Freshservice product marketing team and today we are going to give you a walkthrough of how you can automate and manage your SaaS lifecycles in Freshservice. So let's quickly get started. So SaaS management is the need of the hour. So why do we say so? In this post-pandemic world where remote work has become the most comfortable experience employees prefer, all the enterprises are racing towards adopting cloud-first solutions and therefore SaaS applications. SaaS applications, which were once powering just SMBs, is now empowering agile digital transformation across enterprises of all sizes. So we now have the numbers here which show that about 18% of growth is observed in the SaaS market year on year. And 99% of organizations will be using one or more SaaS apps by 2021. And 78% of SMBs have already invested in SaaS options. So this shows that SaaS applications are the present and will be the future, and SaaS adoption is going to keep growing in the years to come. So you might already be a part of these organizations who have actively started adopting SaaS applications. So this might be the right time for you to take the first steps to set up SaaS management processes for your IT teams. So when you're taking your first steps, there are certain things that can work and certain things which will not work. So when it comes to things which will not work, the first thing is that if you are going to stop with just discovering your SaaS applications, this will not be a scalable SaaS management process. So why we say so is if you're just going to do a one-time audit of all the applications that are there in your organization and stop your SaaS management process right there, it means you're going to lose out on valuable usage insights that you can observe over the life cycle of a SaaS application. So you need to set up processes post-discovery to monitor, optimize, and govern SaaS usage. Secondly, you cannot approach SaaS management as a one-time linear process. So when you're setting up these processes for discovery, for monitoring, optimizing, and governing SaaS usage, this cannot be a one-time effort. So this has to be done in a cyclical, iterative, and continuous manner to set up a scalable SaaS management process that is going to span for a longer period of time into the future. So why is there this need for a continuous process? So there are some intrinsic features of the SaaS applications which mandates this need for a continuous and cyclical process. The first one being easy adoption. Today, employees can seamlessly adopt any application of their choice based on their business needs. They can simply swipe a card and they do not really have to go via the IT teams to adopt a solution. So this means that you as an IT team are going to lack the organizational visibility and control over what kind of adoption is happening in terms of SaaS applications. Secondly, democratized governance. If employees can adopt their own SaaS applications, it also means that they get to decide who gets accesses to these applications, how the privileges are managed, and so on. So there is no adherence to centralized security practices, and as an IT team, so you would not be able to roll out security practices across these applications used by your employees. So for example, if there are employees who have left your organization, they might be still having accesses to some of these unauthorized applications in your ecosystem as they are not going via your team for approvals and governance. Finally, they are auto-renewing in nature. This means if you start investing a certain amount of dollars on a particular application, this is going to be paid year on year or month on month automatically. So without having a continuous process to observe the usage patterns, you cannot really optimize this investment that is going into SaaS applications for its best usage. So what happens is you might be investing more than what is required. So what happens without a continuous process is that you will have ungoverned SaaS adoption. Unauthorized applications will constantly creep up into your ecosystem if you do not have a continuous discovery process in place, which gives you updates about the new applications that are being used by your employees in a real-time manner. Secondly, you would have bloated SaaS costs. as your SaaS investments will not be used to its best. And if you do not constantly monitor the usage patterns, you cannot make any active decisions about upgrades and downgrades to ensure that your investments are optimized further. Finally, chaotic renewals, because there is no real visibility into what apps are being used or how they're being used. You cannot plan your renewals in advance, and you can also not plan your renewals in an intelligent manner based on the continuous usage insights that you can observe. So your best way forward is approaching SaaS management as a continuous lifecycle based process. So SaaS lifecycle management is the best way in which you can ensure that you set up a scalable process to manage your applications through the different phases that they can go through from onboarding to retirement. So there are 4 phases in the SaaS lifecycle management, starting from onboarding, optimization, planning, and finally governance. And in each of these phases, you can optimize usage, cut down costs, reduce risk, and automate processes. So let's now deep dive into each of these phases in a SaaS application's lifecycle and how you can manage these phases in Freshservice. So the first phase is the onboarding phase. So in the onboarding phase, users are assigned to applications. So this assignment might happen either in an authorized manner where IT teams approve these onboarding processes, or it might happen in an unauthorized manner where employees are onboarding themselves to solutions of their choice. So in the onboarding phase, you will be understanding who's using what applications in your IT ecosystem. So onboarding can happen in 2 streams. First is the authorized applications onboarding. So when it comes to authorized applications, your IT teams might already have some streamlined processes in place to ensure that this onboarding is seamless for your employees. For example, you might have some service items set up in your end user portal to ensure that employees can self-serve themselves when they have to raise a request for access to these apps. So here we have Zoom Pro access and we are placing a request for the same. And once this request has been placed, a service request ticket is created for the same. And an agent can seamlessly fulfill this request in just one click. So if you see here, I click on fulfill request and I pick the license with which I want to provision this access and then quickly click on assign. Now, this entire process of service request fulfillment can be automated further. So for example, if you have some approvals in place, or if you have specific agent groups to whom these service requests have to be assigned, you can set up workflows to ensure that this is done in an automated way. And not just that, here we have another service request which has been raised for Azure AD access. So as you can see, this is an employee onboarding request. So when an employee comes into an organization, the first access that they would require is the access to the identity provider you're using across your enterprise. So here they have raised a request for Azure AD, and you can see that an automation has been triggered to provision this access automatically. So using Orchestration Center, you can ensure that actions can be performed directly on the applications. So we will discuss in the upcoming phases as to how you can set up such automated processes with the help of Orchestration Center. So in your onboarding phase, when it comes to authorized apps, you will have existing service items to raise requests, you will have approvals in place to provision this access, and automated processes to route these requests to the right teams or even to provision access with the help of Orchestration Center. Now finally, when it comes to unauthorized applications here, employees will onboard themselves onto apps for their needs. So as an IT team, to stay on top of these unauthorized applications, what you can do is you can set up discovery methods to actively discover these newly adopted apps. Now what you can do is once you've discovered these apps, you can categorize them further to see how you will handle them in the upcoming phases or in the next cycle. So here you can see that in Freshservice, we have something called Discover software here. So SaaS management in Freshservice allows you to integrate with identity providers like Azure, OneLogin, Okta, or Google Suite. So with the help of these integrations, what you can do is when employees sign up for applications via these identity providers, then these will be automatically discovered into Freshservice. So you can stay on top of all of these newly discovered software, and you can decide as to how they will be managed as a part of your IT team's processes. So you can either restrict them, you can ignore them, or you can even decide to manage them further in your upcoming phases or in your next cycle. So this is how you can stay on top of the onboarding phase for your unauthorized applications. And here's what you get if you do it right. So you will have improved visibility into all your newly adopted apps by having an auto-updating list of all the SaaS applications used. So when you have a continuous discovery process in place, you will get real-time information about all the new applications that are creeping into your ecosystem. So thereby you can also reduce risk by identifying restricted apps way in advance. Now when it comes to authorized applications, you will have streamlined onboarding processes in place, and therefore right from when a service request is raised for an access to an application to where it is provisioned, you can set up a completely streamlined and an automated process. Finally, you can also identify the right apps to be monitored and optimized. So since you have streamlined processes for authorized applications, you can observe the volume of service requests that are coming in for a particular application. So based on this, you can make a decision as to whether you have to actively monitor this in the optimization phase or not. So when it comes to unauthorized applications, you can also pick a few of these applications to monitor their usage and then decide further as to how your IT teams can manage them. So that brings us to the next phase, which is the optimization phase. So post assignment, this is the phase where you will be monitoring active usage for license optimization and consolidation efforts. So what do we mean by license optimization? So when you have authorized applications, you already have some licenses in place for them, and you want to ensure that these licenses are used in the best way possible. So here is where optimization efforts will be really helpful. And when it comes to consolidation efforts, you can observe if the same business need is being solved by multiple solutions, and you can consolidate them to avoid multiple investments to solve the same problem. So in the optimization phase, you would be understanding as to how the apps are being used, and based on that, you will optimize usage. So for authorized applications, you would optimize licenses for the best usage. So let's quickly see in Freshservice as to how we can do this. So here we have insights provided to you so that you can seamlessly execute your optimization efforts. So here in Compliance Insights, you can see that you have about 3 deactivated users still mapped to your managed application. So what you can do is you can quickly click on this insight, select the users who are deactivated, and deprovision them right from here. So by deactivating these users, you are doing 2 things. One is that you're ensuring that your licenses are put to the best use. And secondly, you're also avoiding security risks by removing any employees who have left the organization from having access to tools. Secondly, when it comes to usage insights, you can see that there are about 207 no activity users still using Zoom, right? And you can see that you can save about $41,000 here. So what you can quickly do is you can look into this list of users and you can downgrade them to a basic plan, right? So these are some of the optimization efforts that you can take for your authorized applications. And when it comes to unauthorized applications, what you can do is you can monitor the usage to decide how you would be managing these applications from this point onwards. So not all unauthorized applications would be a threat to your ecosystem. Some of them might be actual business needs that your employees are trying to solve. So what you can do is you can gauge if these apps have to be inducted into your ecosystem, and you can also see if some of these users can be onboarded onto authorized apps. So what we mean by that is, if you go to the list of discovered software, so you can see the category being listed here. So we have an inbuilt repository of 1,000 plus applications based on which all the newly discovered software are automatically categorized. So these categories will give you an idea of what business need these applications are solving. So now that you have a new discovered software for expense management, what you can do is you can go back and check if you have any authorized and managed applications for the same business need. So I have filtered out an expense management software, and you can see that I have one managed application solving the same problem already. So what I can do is I can consolidate the users from the unauthorized application onto this managed application. So these are some of the optimization efforts you can take for your unauthorized applications. And by doing this, this is what you would get. You are optimizing for the best license usage, and you're reducing risk by deprovisioning all your inactive users. Now, you're also gathering insights to plan your next cycle. So what we mean by this is that you're going to have all the usage insights in your disposal to ensure that your next cycle can be planned in the most optimized manner. You're also ensuring that all of the unauthorized applications that are coming into your ecosystem are being categorized right, so that in the next life cycle they can either be inducted into your ecosystem or they can be restricted or ignored. And finally, you are taking proactive measures to ensure intelligent renewals. So what we mean by that is if you get your optimization phase right, it means that automatically you would be renewing your applications in the most optimized way, as you would have observed these usage patterns and upgraded or downgraded users accordingly, and you would have also deprovisioned inactive users. So when you're planning for the next batch of renewals, you would do it with the right amount of investment that is needed. The next phase in a SaaS application's lifecycle is the planning phase. So in the planning phase, what you would do is, so you would take all the data that you have consolidated from your onboarding and optimization phases to plan renewals for your managed apps. So you will plan your SaaS application's next cycle with the right licensing, renewals, and retirement. So when it comes to the authorized applications, you can do one of these two things. One is you consolidate all the insights that you have received from the optimization phase and you renew your applications in an intelligent manner. Or if you see that some of these applications can be retired, that is, if you have a better SaaS application that can be adopted, or if you have seen a drop in a SaaS application's usage, you can choose to retire this application. So you can either renew a managed app or you can retire it. Now, when it comes to unauthorized applications, you would see certain applications that can be inducted into your ecosystem. So this is where you start the life cycle for these applications. You would create contracts for these applications. So this is how you can do it. You would create contracts for these applications. You would just fill out all the details required, set up the tenure for the contract. Let's say we set it up for the next 1 year. And you can also set up auto renewals, and you can set up notifications to ensure that the right people are notified before a certain number of days, right? Then you can fill out all the other details and create a contract for this. Now, what this will ensure is that you are starting the next life cycle for these newly inducted apps. And in the upcoming life cycle for these applications, you can observe the usage for these apps further and optimize them in the right way. Now finally, when it comes to the other unauthorized applications, so you can choose to restrict or ignore them if you're not going to govern them as a part of your IT team's processes. So here's what you get if you do it right. Now, if you get your planning phase right, your next cycle will run in the most optimized manner because you're going to be renewing for the right number of users who would be requiring licensing, and you would also do this in a secure manner, as all of the deactivated users, that is the employees who have left the organization, have been deprovisioned from your applications. Next, you would have inducted all of these new apps into your ecosystem. That is, as a part of all of these unauthorized applications that were discovered, you would have started the lifecycle for certain apps to actively manage them as a part of your IT team's governance processes. And once you've started the lifecycle for these apps, it means you're also unlocking usage insights for them so that in the upcoming life cycles they can be optimized further. You're also ensuring intelligent insight-driven renewals. And finally, the next steps for the apps that will not be managed for the IT teams are also decided. So that brings us to the last phase of a SaaS application's lifecycle, that is the governance phase. So this is where you would be setting up processes to ensure that all the other phases in a SaaS application's lifecycle can be run in a streamlined and an automated way. So we have Pratiksha here who will be walking you through a combined solution of SaaS management and orchestration that can help you set up such governance processes. Over to you, Pratiksha.
Hey, thanks Niharika for taking us through all these phases. Hello everyone. Thanks for joining in. I'm Pratiksha from Freshservice product marketing team. So now that you've got all of the insights and informations from the onboarding, planning and optimization phases, we'll be moving to the governance part, which is a culminating phase in SaaS lifecycle. So based on the insights gained from the earlier phases, IT team can now consolidate and choose which apps need to be authorized and inducted into the system and focus on how to set up processes to govern both authorized and unauthorized application within the organization. The life cycle of authorized apps in the governance phase includes a process flow, and this process is initiated by creating a service catalog for all the applications that the team actively manages. So during the course of this process, IT teams can define and automate the approval and assignment processes to the right teams. So now to take action on your unauthorized applications, let's quickly take a look at a product. Once you connect your identity provider, for instance Okta to Freshservice, you'll see a curated list of applications that are populated under the Discover tab. So here you can discover all your applications that are used within the organization and also authenticated by your respective identity provider. So teams can now decide if a particular application, for instance Microsoft Excel, should not be used, then they can go ahead and restrict the particular application. Or if we choose to allow that application usage within the organization but decide not to spend on that particular application, then we can simply move the status to ignore. So IT teams also need to ensure that they identify the right administrator for each of the applications. So in this way, it's easier to look into the respective application owner and notify them when a particular application comes up for renewal, rather than maintaining all these lists and spreadsheets. So now let's take an example here. Emily is a new employee and the IT team needs to onboard her in their organization's IDP to provide her with SSO access so that she can access all the applications within the organization. So over the course of time, Emily realizes that she needs to make longer calls and raises an ad hoc request to upgrade her Zoom account from basic to licensed. So we'll now see how IT teams have automated all these processes in Freshservice with the help of orchestration. The IT teams have created service items for all the applications that the team actively manages. Now let's go ahead and create an account for Emily in Azure. Now let's go ahead and see what happens to the ticket. So once the request has been raised, automation kicks in and takes care of the process. Now Emily got her account created in Azure and we have allocated Microsoft Team license to Emily. So let's see how the IT teams have automated their user provisioning with the help of orchestration within the organization. This is a sample employee onboarding workflow for Azure AD. So we have an event and a condition to ensure that the workflow kicks in only when an onboarding request is raised. So now, with the help of the app node, we can actually connect with Azure through the orchestration by installing the orchestration app from the orchestration center. So over here, we are querying a particular user to check if the user already exists in the Azure AD. So to confirm if the user is not part of the AD, we are making use of the system message over here. So after confirming, we are going ahead and creating the user by mapping all the details from the service request form with the help of the placeholders. So once we've created the user, we're going ahead and getting the group details relevant to the employee who got onboarded. So in our use case, we've entered HR as a department. So we are getting group details relevant to the HR department in Azure. Now that we've got the group details, we are going ahead and adding them to the respective groups. So finally, to assign Microsoft 365 licenses to a user, we need SKU IDs. So this SKU IDs will give users access to Microsoft 365 services that are defined for those plans. For this, we are using the reader node to read the information from the custom object. So this custom object contains the mapping of licenses based on the job title of the user. So the reader node will look for the job title given in the service request form and will return the relevant SKU ID. So once the licenses are assigned to a particular user, we are going ahead and notifying the requester. So for Emily's new ad hoc request, IT teams have set up a similar workflow to allocate Zoom license to her. Let's take a quick look at it. This is a sample workflow for Zoom user provisioning. So whenever a service request is raised, with the help of the condition block, we are checking if it's a Zoom request. So once a request is being raised, we are sending an approval to the requester's manager. So once it's approved, with the help of the orchestration, we are querying that particular user in Zoom application. So if the user does not exist, we are going ahead and creating that particular user and allocating license for them. And we are finally adding a role to that specific user and notifying the requester of the ticket. So if the user already exists in the Zoom application, we are confirming if it's a basic user or a licensed user. So if it's a basic user, we are going ahead and updating that specific profile and finally notifying the requester in the ticket. Now let's see how we can automate the processes in optimization phase.
The lifecycle of a SaaS application doesn't come to an end in the onboarding phase. IT teams need to analyze and optimize the spend on these applications based on how frequently these applications are being used and when are these applications coming up for renewal. Hence, the team needs to ensure that there is an active automation to power optimization efforts. Let's say Zoom application is coming up for renewal. Now, how can IT teams optimize on this? When you click on the Insights under the Usage tab, you will see a list of applications generated before a contract comes up for expiry. So in Zoom, there are currently 207 users that are inactive. So you can immediately act on these users by downgrading them to basic plan. All you have to do is click on that particular application and select a user to take an action on them. You'll see a form that pops up to your right where you can perform specific actions on a user. All these actions that are listed are populated from service items that get seeded in Freshservice. Now when you select Downgrade User to Basic and initiate an action, a service request gets created immediately. So instead of switching to Zoom application and downgrading the user to Basic plan, we can set up a workflow within Freshservice to automate this entire process. You can see that the user has been downgraded to Zoom Basic automatically without having to switch to the Zoom application. Likewise, the applications under the Compliance tab are populated when we identify that the deactivated user in Freshservice is being a part of that application. IT teams in Freshservice deactivate users when they leave an organization. All these 3 Zoom licenses can be repurposed for someone else within the organization. So when you click on the Zoom, you will find a list of deactivated users who are still having access to the application and can be deprovisioned. So with a few clicks of a button, you can offboard the user and perform an action on them immediately within Freshservice. Now let's dive into the workflow and see how we can automate all these processes within Freshservice. We have a simple workflow here, and this workflow kicks in when a service request is raised. And with the help of the condition blocks, we are checking which action should be performed on the user. For example, let's take deprovisioning a user. So when the requested item includes any SaaS action, and when the application name is Zoom, and one of the app actions is deprovision user, with the help of the orchestration capability, we are connecting to Zoom directly and performing the deactivate user with email right from Freshservice without having to switch to Zoom. So once this action is a success, we are going ahead and adding a success node to the ticket. So similarly, we can create condition blocks for each action and directly execute these actions right from the Freshservice using the orchestration app. So with SaaS management and orchestration in place, you can define automated processes to take actions on both your authorized and unauthorized apps right from user onboarding to offboarding without having to switch between multiple applications. Now that we have discussed one of the use cases, you can follow our Workflow of the Week series to know more about such use cases. So Workflow of the Week series is a recurring series in our Freshworks community portal where we showcase how to configure workflows and share some tips and tricks that can help while automating and much more. So if you guys have any workflows that you have constructed and think that might be useful to share with the other community members, so you can reach out to us and we'll be happy to showcase them in the series as well. So before switching to our Q&A session, we have collated few useful resources that you can make use of. The first link will help you to manage your SaaS applications efficiently using simple 5-step processes. Along with it, we have listed installation guides and use cases that can help you out. So the next two links will give you an overview of the orchestration center and server. So this article describes orchestration in detail with sample use cases and videos that can help you get started. The seventh link will give you a list of all the applications that we support in orchestration. So we constantly keep adding apps to this list, and each application folder will give you a detailed overview of how to install along with the sample use cases. The final one is a video link for orchestration with sample use cases that focuses mainly on how to part of the configurations. So do check them out. And that brings us to the end of the session. Thanks everyone. So if you have any questions, do post them in. We'll answer them right away.